The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage, the metallic echo bouncing off the walls like a gunshot in the night. I'd been under the hood of my '98 Ford pickup for the better part of 3 hours, trying to coax life back into the carburetor, when I heard it, my wife Lisa's voice drifting through the thin walls of our house, punctuated by a laugh I hadn't heard in years. "Oh, Chad, you're so bad," she giggled into her phone, the sound carrying through the October air like poison on the wind. "I can't wait until next time. Tom's working late again tomorrow night." Tom. That would be me. Tom Bradley, 42 years old, handyman extraordinaire, and apparently the world's biggest fool. I wiped my hands on an old rag and crept closer to the side door of the garage, the one that faced our kitchen window. Through the yellow glow, I could see Lisa pacing back and forth, her blonde hair catching the light as she twirled a strand around her finger, something she used to do when we first started dating, back when I thought I was the luckiest bastard in Millfield, Maine. "He has no idea," she continued, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a seductive whisper. "Poor Tom. Still thinks I'm at book club every Thursday. If he only knew what kind of books we're reading." The laugh that followed made my stomach turn. It was the kind of laugh that said she was enjoying this, not just the affair, but the deception. The complete and utter humiliation of the man who'd been fixing her car, her appliances, and apparently her broken heart for the past 18 years. I stood there in the darkness of my garage, surrounded by the tools of my trade, hammers, screwdrivers, wrenches, all the things I used to fix what was broken. But I couldn't fix this. Hell, I didn't even know it was broken until 30 seconds ago. The side door to the garage burst open, and my 17-year-old daughter Emma stormed in, her face flushed with anger and her eyes blazing with the kind of righteous indignation that only teenagers can muster. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, crossing her arms over her chest in a gesture that reminded me painfully of her mother. "Not now, Em," I muttered, still trying to process what I'd just heard. "I'm busy." "Yeah, I can see that." Hiding in the garage again while Mom's on the phone with Chad, she rolled her eyes. "God, Dad, if you were more of a man, Mom wouldn't need him. At least he actually listens to her." The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to face my daughter, this person I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, and cheered for at every soccer game for the past 10 years. "What did you just say?" Emma's defiance wavered slightly, but she pressed on. "You heard me. Chad actually cares about Mom's feelings. He takes her to nice restaurants, buys her flowers, treats her like she matters. When's the last time you did any of that?" "Chad?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "You know about Chad?" "Everyone knows about Chad, Dad. Everyone except you, apparently." She shook her head in disgust. "Sandy told me at school that Mom deserves better, and you know what? She's right." Sandy. Lisa's best friend since high school, the queen bee of Millfield's social scene, and apparently my daughter's new life coach. Perfect. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my garage. Now." Emma's eyes widened, but she turned and stalked back toward the house, muttering something about me being pathetic. I watched her go, then looked around at my sanctuary, the one place in this house where I'd felt safe, where I'd felt competent, where I'd felt like a man. Now it just felt like a tomb. I walked over to my workbench and sat down heavily on the old stool I'd inherited from my father. The same father who'd beaten me senseless every night for the first 15 years of my life, until I'd finally grown big enough to hit back. The same childhood trauma that Lisa had convinced me to share with her during those long, intimate nights early in our marriage, when she'd promised that my secrets were safe with her. The same trauma she'd thrown back in my face during our last big fight when she'd screamed, "Maybe you should have never made it out of that hellhole. At least then I wouldn't be stuck with damaged goods." I'd thought we'd moved past that. I thought we were building something together. But apparently, while I was building, she was planning her escape route. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my buddy Terry at the boxing gym. "You coming in tonight? Heavy bags calling your name." Terry McKenna, 60 years old and built like a brick shithouse, had been teaching me to box for the past 5 years. "It's not about the violence," he told me on my first day. "It's about the control. Learning when to hit, when to block, and when to walk away." Right now, walking away seemed like the only option that wouldn't end with me in handcuffs. I was about to text him back when I heard Lisa's voice again, closer this time. She was walking toward the garage, still on her phone. "I have to go, baby," she was saying. "Tom's probably wondering where I am. Yes, I'll call you tomorrow. Love you too." Love you too. I ducked behind my workbench, just as she appeared in the doorway, her silhouette backlit by the porch light. She was wearing the red dress. I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she'd claimed was too fancy for anywhere we ever went. "Tom, are you out here?" I held my breath, crouched behind the bench, like a burglar in my own garage. After a moment, she shrugged and walked back toward the house, her heels clicking on the concrete. I waited until I heard the kitchen door close, then stood up and walked over to the small window that faced the street. Mrs. Duffy's house across the way was dark, except for the blue glow of her television. The old woman probably knew more about my marriage than I did, considering how much time she spent watching our house from behind her curtains. The fog was rolling in from the coast, turning the streetlights into fuzzy halos, and making the whole neighborhood look like something out of a Stephen King novel, which, considering I lived in Maine and my life was apparently turning into a horror story, seemed oddly appropriate. I pulled out my phone and texted Terry back. "On my way, bring the big gloves." If I was going to be the last to know about my wife's affair, at least I could be the first to do something about it. The next morning, I woke up with sore knuckles and a clearer head. Terry had let me pound the heavy bag until my arms felt like jelly, and somewhere between the third and fourth round, a plan had started to form. Lisa was already gone by the time I stumbled into the kitchen. Off to her real estate office, where she spent her days selling dreams to other people, while apparently shopping for her own somewhere else. She'd left a note on the counter. "Tom, Emma has practice tonight. I'll be late. Don't wait up. L." No love. No XOXO. Just L. Like she was signing a business memo. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared at the note. In the old days, she would have drawn little hearts around her name, or at least written, "Love, Lisa." Now I got a single initial and a clear message. Don't wait up. The house felt different in the morning light. The same furniture, the same pictures on the walls, the same coffee maker gurgling on the counter. But it all felt like a stage set now, a carefully constructed lie designed to fool the neighbors and apparently me. I walked into the living room and looked at our wedding photo on the mantle. 20-year-old Lisa beaming up at 24-year-old me, both of us convinced we were going to conquer the world together. She'd been working at the bank then. I'd just started my handyman business, and we'd had plans. Big plans. Somewhere along the way, her plans had apparently changed to include someone named Chad. I spent the morning doing what I did every morning, fixing things. Mrs. Patterson's leaky faucet, the Johnson squeaky door, old Mr. Henley's broken porch step. Honest work for honest pay. The kind of simple transactions that made sense in a world that was starting to feel increasingly complicated. But my mind kept wandering back to that phone conversation. Poor Tom still thinks I'm at book club every Thursday. How long had this been going on? How many Thursday nights had I sat in this house, watching TV and thinking my wife was discussing the latest bestseller with her friends? By noon, I had made a decision that would have made my old man proud. I was going to do some investigating. Lisa kept her real phone, the one connected to our family plan, on her nightstand when she was home. But if she was having an affair, there had to be another phone somewhere, a burner phone like they used in the movies. I drove home during my lunch break and parked in the garage. The house was empty. Emma was at school, Lisa was at work, and I had maybe an hour before someone came home. I started in our bedroom, going through Lisa's dresser drawers, with the methodical precision I usually reserved for troubleshooting electrical problems. Underwear drawer, nothing but underwear, and some pieces I'd never seen before. Sock drawer, socks and a small jewelry box containing earrings that definitely weren't from me. The closet was next. Lisa's side was organized like a department store, everything arranged by color and season. I ran my hands along the shelves, checked the pockets of coats and jackets, looked inside her shoe boxes. Nothing. I was about to give up when I remembered something my father used to do when he wanted to hide his drinking money from my mother. He'd tape envelopes to the underside of drawers, places where someone would have to really look to find them. I pulled out the bottom drawer of Lisa's nightstand and flipped it over. Bingo. Taped to the bottom was a small manila envelope. Inside was a cheap flip phone and a folded piece of paper with a phone number written in Lisa's handwriting. Below the number, she'd written C with a little heart next to it. C for Chad, Chad with a heart. I turned on the phone and scrolled through the text messages. What I found there made my stomach turn and my hand shake with something that might have been rage or might have been grief. The messages went back 3 months. 3 months of good morning, beautiful, and can't wait to see you tonight, and Tom's working late again, perfect. 3 months of explicit photos that I won't describe, but that made it clear this wasn't just an emotional affair. But it was the most recent exchange that really got to me. Chad, when are you going to tell him? Lisa, soon. I just need to figure out the best way to do it. He's so pathetic. I almost feel sorry for him. Chad, don't. You deserve better than some blue-collar loser who can't even afford to take you anywhere nice. Lisa, I know. God, I can't believe I wasted 18 years of my life. Chad, well, you won't waste any more. I promise. 18 years. Wasted. I sat there on our bed. Our bed. Reading messages between my wife and her lover, and felt something inside me break. Not my heart, exactly. That had been cracking for months without me realizing it. This was something deeper. Something fundamental. My faith in the basic decency of the world, maybe. Or my belief that if you worked hard and treated people right, they'd treat you right in return. I took pictures of the most damning messages with my own phone, then put everything back exactly where I'd found it. Lisa would never know I'd been there, but I would know, and that knowledge was going to change everything. I was walking back to my truck when Mrs. Duffy appeared at her front door, wearing a housecoat and slippers despite the fact that it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Tom! She called out, waving me over with an urgency that suggested either a medical emergency or really good gossip. I walked across the street, trying to look like a man who hadn't just discovered his wife was cheating on him with someone named Chad. What's up, Mrs. Duffy? She glanced around conspiratorially, then leaned closer. I probably shouldn't say anything, but I've been seeing some things. What kind of things? Well, last Thursday night, I saw Lisa leave the house all dressed up. Real fancy, you know? And then about an hour later, this expensive car pulls up, one of those foreign jobs, and she gets in. My mouth went dry. What did the driver look like? Younger than you, dark hair, nice suit. Looked like money, if you know what I mean. She paused, studying my face. Tom, honey, I hope I'm wrong, but you're not wrong, I said quietly. Mrs. Duffy's face fell. Oh, Tom, I'm so sorry. I was hoping maybe it was just... I don't know, maybe she was helping him look at houses or something. Yeah, well, looks like she was helping him with something, all right. I started to walk away, then turned back. Mrs. Duffy, if anyone asks, we never had this conversation.
She nodded solemnly.
Of course, dear. But, Tom, if you need anything at all, you just let me know. I spent the rest of the afternoon working on autopilot, my hands going through the familiar motions while my brain processed what I'd learned. By the time I got home that evening, I'd made another decision. I was going to follow them. Lisa was in the kitchen when I walked in, stirring something on the stove that smelled like the chicken marsala she used to make for special occasions. She was wearing makeup and had changed into a different outfit. Casual, but carefully chosen. The kind of thing you'd wear if you wanted to look good without looking like you were trying too hard. How was your day? She asked without looking up from the stove. Same as always. Fixed some things, broke some others. I opened the refrigerator and grabbed a beer. You? Busy. Showed 3 houses, had 2 closings, and Sandy wants me to come to book club tonight. I told her I wasn't sure if I could make it. Book club. Right. You should go, I said. You love book club. She glanced at me with surprise. Usually, I complained when she went out on weeknights, pointing out that we barely saw each other as it was. Really? You don't mind? Nah, I'll probably go to the gym anyway. Terry's been after me to work on my footwork. Lisa smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in weeks. That sounds great. We should both get out more, do our own things. Do our own things. Like she wasn't already doing her own thing 3 nights a week. What are you reading this month? I asked, just to see what she'd say. She stirred the sauce more vigorously. It's a romance novel. You wouldn't be interested. A romance novel. Well, that wasn't technically a lie. We ate dinner in relative peace, making small talk about Emma's grades and my work schedule and the weather. Just like a normal married couple having a normal conversation about their normal lives. Except nothing about this was normal anymore. After dinner, Lisa went upstairs to get ready for quote-unquote book club. I loaded the dishwasher and waited. At 7:30, she came back down, wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, and enough perfume to choke a horse. "I'll probably be late," she said, kissing my cheek with the kind of perfunctory affection you'd show a brother. "Don't wait up." "Have fun," I said. "Tell the girls I said hi." She was out the door 5 minutes later. I waited another 10 minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed. Following someone in a small Maine town is harder than it looks in the movies. There aren't enough cars on the road to blend in, and everybody knows everybody else's vehicle. My beat-up Ford pickup wasn't exactly inconspicuous, but it was dark, and Lisa wasn't expecting to be followed, so I figured I had a decent shot. She drove straight through downtown Millfield, past the hardware store where I bought most of my supplies, past the diner where we used to go for breakfast on Sundays, past the church where we'd gotten married. She turned left on Harbor Road, heading toward the lake. The Rusty Anchor was exactly the kind of place I'd expected. A rundown bar that catered to tourists in the summer and locals who didn't want to be seen in the winter. It sat right on the water, with a gravel parking lot and neon beer signs in the windows that had seen better decades. I parked behind a line of pine trees, about 50 yards away, and watched as Lisa pulled into the lot. She sat in her car for a moment, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror, then got out and walked toward the entrance. She didn't go inside. Instead, she walked around to the side of the building, where a black BMW was parked in the shadows. The driver's door opened and a man got out. Tall, well-dressed, everything Mrs. Duffy had described and more. Chad. Even from a distance, I could tell he was younger than me, probably mid-30s, with the kind of confident posture that came from never having to worry about money. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. And when he smiled at my wife, I could practically see his teeth gleaming in the darkness. Lisa walked straight into his arms like she belonged there. They kissed. Not a quick peck, but a long, passionate kiss that made my hands clench around the steering wheel. When they finally broke apart, he opened the passenger door of his car, and she got in. They drove away together, leaving Lisa's car in the parking lot like evidence of a crime. I sat there for a moment, trying to decide what to do. I could follow them, but that seemed like a good way to end up watching something I really didn't want to see. I could go home and pretend this never happened. Or I could do something that would make me feel better, even if it was stupid. I chose stupid. I got out of my truck and walked over to Chad's parking spot. The gravel crunched under my feet, and somewhere in the distance, a loon called across the water. The sound was lonely and haunting, which seemed appropriate. I pulled out my keys and walked around to the driver's side of the BMW. The paint was pristine, probably detailed every week by someone who charged more per hour than I made per day. I dragged my house key along the side of the car, from the front wheel well to the back bumper. The sound of metal on metal was satisfying in a way that probably said something disturbing about my mental state. Then I did the other side. When I was finished, I stepped back to admire my work. I left him a message in the paint, I muttered to myself. Call it folk art. I was walking back to my truck when the bar's back door opened and light spilled out into the parking lot. A burly guy in a stained apron stepped outside, probably the cook taking a smoke break. "Hey," he yelled. "Hey, you!" I broke into a run, my work boots slipping on the loose gravel. Behind me, I could hear the cook yelling something about calling the cops and getting my license plate number. I made it to my truck and peeled out of there like a teenager fleeing a house party. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking, but I felt more alive than I had in months. It wasn't until I was halfway home that I realized the cook had probably gotten a clear look at me in the light from the doorway. And if the Rusty Anchor had security cameras... My phone buzzed with a text message. For a wild moment, I thought it might be the police, but it was from an unknown number. "Saw what you did to Chad's car. Classy move, Tom. S." S for Sandy. Lisa's best friend, the queen bee, the puppet master pulling all the strings. How the hell did Sandy know what I'd done unless she'd been there? Unless she'd been watching. Unless this whole thing was even more orchestrated than I'd thought. I drove home with a growing sense that I was playing a game where I didn't know the rules, and everyone else had a head start. The house was dark when I pulled into the garage. Emma was at her friend's house for the night, and Lisa wouldn't be home for hours. I had the place to myself, which was good, because I needed to think. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down at the kitchen table with Lisa's burner phone. I'd taken it with me when I left the house, figuring she wouldn't miss it until tomorrow morning. I scrolled through more of her messages with Chad, looking for clues about how long this had been going on and how serious it was. What I found was worse than I'd expected. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. Found a great house in Portland. 2 bedrooms, perfect for you and Emma. What about Tom? What about him?
You file for divorce, take him for everything he's worth, and start over. Simple.
Lisa. It's not that simple. He'll fight me. Chad. Let him fight. My lawyer will eat his alive. His lawyer. Of course Chad had a lawyer. Probably had a whole team of lawyers. I kept reading, my anger building with each message. They'd discussed everything. How to maximize Lisa's settlement, how to get custody of Emma, how to make sure I ended up with as little as possible. But it was the next exchange that really made my blood boil. Lisa, I feel bad about using his childhood against him, but my lawyer says it'll help establish that he's unstable. Chad, don't feel bad. You told me what his father did to him. Anyone who grew up like that is damaged goods. The court will see that.
I know. I just never thought I'd have to use it.
You do what you have to do. We're talking about the rest of your life here. The rest of her life. And apparently, I wasn't going to be part of it. I set the phone down and stared at the wall. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm, too full of memories of better times. I could see Lisa at the stove, making breakfast on Sunday mornings. Emma at the table, complaining about homework. All of us together, a family. But it had all been a lie. Or at least it had become one. My phone buzzed again, another text from Sandy. Hope you had fun tonight. Tomorrow should be even more interesting. I stared at the message, trying to figure out what it meant. Tomorrow was Friday. Lisa didn't usually go out on Friday nights. That was supposed to be family night, though we hadn't had a real family night in months. I was still staring at the phone when I heard a car in the driveway. Lisa was home early. I quickly put her burner phone back in my pocket and grabbed my beer, trying to look casual. A moment later, she walked through the kitchen door, her hair slightly mussed and her makeup smudged. How was book club? I asked. Fine, she said, not meeting my eyes. We discussed character development. Learn anything interesting? She paused at the bottom of the stairs, her hand on the banister. Just that sometimes people aren't who you think they are. Ain't that the truth, I said. She looked at me sharply, but I kept my expression neutral. After a moment, she shrugged and headed upstairs. I'm tired, she called back. Don't come up too late. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close, then pulled out my phone and called Terry. McKenna, he answered on the second ring. Terry, it's Tom. You busy tomorrow night? Depends. What do you need? I think I'm going to need some backup. There was a pause. What kind of backup? The kind where you and maybe a couple of the boys help me with a little project. Tom, you're not thinking of doing anything stupid, are you? I looked up at the ceiling, where I could hear Lisa moving around in our bedroom, probably washing off the smell of another man. Terry, I said, I think stupid is exactly what I'm thinking of doing.
Friday morning brought rain and a revelation that changed everything I thought I knew about my situation.
I was in the garage, pretending to work on my truck, while actually trying to figure out my next move, when Emma burst through the side door, with tears streaming down her face. Dad, I need to talk to you, she said, her voice breaking. I looked up from the engine, surprised. Emma and I hadn't had a real conversation in months. Everything had been filtered through Lisa or delivered in angry bursts, like the one 2 nights ago. What's wrong, Em? She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, looking younger than her 17 years. It's about Mom and everything. I think I messed up really bad. I set down my wrench and gave her my full attention. What do you mean? Sandy came to see me at school yesterday. She said she heard you were following Mom around, spying on her. She said you were getting dangerous and that Mom might need to get a restraining order. My blood went cold. Sandy said what? She said you keyed some guy's car and that the police were going to arrest you. She said Mom was scared and that I should stay away from you until things calmed down. I stared at my daughter, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in my mind. Emma, how long has Sandy been talking to you about your mother and me? I don't know. A few months, I guess. She said she was worried about our family, that she could see things weren't good between you and Mom. Emma's voice got smaller. Sandy made it sound like you were the problem, like you were holding Mom back from being happy. But yesterday, when she was talking about you being dangerous, something didn't feel right. I pulled out a chair from my workbench and sat down heavily. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Do you know about Chad? Her face crumpled. Yes. How long have you known? Since it started? Sandy told me Mom had met someone who made her happy, someone who treated her right. She said it was natural for Mom to want to explore her options, and that I should be supportive. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Sandy told you to be supportive of your mother's affair? She didn't call it that. She said Mom was just figuring out what she wanted, and that I should want her to be happy. Emma was crying again. Dad, I'm so sorry. I thought you were the bad guy. Sandy made it sound like you were mean to Mom, like you didn't appreciate her. I stood up and pulled my daughter into a hug. She felt small and fragile in my arms, and I realized that she'd been manipulated just as much as I had, maybe more. It's not your fault, Em. Sandy's been playing games with all of us. But why? Why would she do that? That was a good question. I'd been assuming Sandy was just Lisa's loyal friend, supporting her through a midlife crisis. But what if it was more than that? I don't know yet, I said, but I'm going to find out. After Emma went to school, I did something I probably should have done weeks ago. I started researching Sandy Morrison. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. 5 years ago, Sandy had worked for my handyman business as a bookkeeper. She'd lasted exactly 3 months before I'd had to let her go for padding her hours and skimming from petty cash. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened right before I fired her. I'd been working late one night, trying to catch up on paperwork, when Sandy had come back to the office. She'd been drinking. I could smell it on her breath. And she'd made a pass at me that was about as subtle as a brick through a window. Come on, Tom, she'd said, pressing herself against me. We both know your marriage is going nowhere. Why don't you let me show you what you're missing? I'd turned her down as gently as I could, but she hadn't taken it well. She'd called me an idiot and stormed out. And the next week, I'd discovered the financial irregularities that led to her termination. At the time, I'd thought that was the end of it. But apparently Sandy Morrison was the kind of woman who held grudges. Long, patient, devastating grudges. I spent the rest of the morning putting together a timeline. Sandy gets fired 5 years ago. Clear 3 years later, she reconnects with Lisa through some mutual friends and becomes her closest confidant. 6 months ago, she starts poisoning Emma against me. 3 months ago, Lisa's affair with Chad begins. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a plan. But I still didn't know who Chad was or how Sandy had connected him with Lisa. That piece of the puzzle was missing. I was about to do some more digging when my phone rang. The caller ID said Millfield Police Department. Mr. Bradley, this is Officer Martinez. We need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about an incident at the Rusty Anchor last night. My stomach dropped. What kind of incident? Vandalism. Someone damaged a vehicle in the parking lot, and we have reason to believe you might have information about it. I'll be right there. The Millfield Police Department was housed in a brick building that had been built in the 1950s and hadn't been updated since. Officer Martinez was a young guy, probably in his late 20s, with a kind of earnest demeanor that suggested he took his job seriously. Mr. Bradley, were you at the Rusty Anchor last night between 8 and 9 p.m.? I decided on the drive over that lying to the police was probably not my best option. Yes, I was. Can you tell me why you were there? I was following my wife. I suspect she's having an affair. Martinez nodded like this was a perfectly normal Friday morning conversation. Did you interact with anyone while you were there? No, I stayed in my truck. Did you approach any vehicles in the parking lot? Here it was, the moment of truth. Yes. Can you describe what you did? I keyed a BMW. Black BMW. Looked expensive. Martinez made a note. Why did you do that? Because I was angry. My wife got into that car with another man, and I wanted to hurt him somehow. Mr. Bradley, you understand that what you did constitutes criminal mischief, right? The owner of that vehicle is pressing charges. I figured he might. Martinez studied me for a moment. The thing is, we have you on security camera doing the damage, but we also have something else. He turned his computer monitor so I could see it. The screen showed security footage from the bar's parking lot, black and white and grainy, but clear enough to make out what was happening. There I was, walking around the BMW with my keys out. But in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was another car. A white sedan with someone sitting in the driver's seat. Someone who had been watching the whole thing. "Do you know who that is?" Martinez asked. I squinted at the screen. The image was too dark and grainy to make out details, but something about the car looked familiar. "I'm not sure." "Well, here's the interesting part. About 10 minutes after you left, that car pulled up next to the BMW. Someone got out, took pictures of the damage, and then left. We think whoever it was might have been waiting for something like this to happen. My mind was racing. Someone had been watching me, waiting for me to do something stupid, ready to document it when I did. Mr. Bradley, I'm going to level with you. The owner of the BMW, a guy named Chad Brennan, he's got money and connections. He wants to press charges, and normally we'd have to arrest you." Chad Brennan? Finally, a last name. "But," Martinez continued, "my sergeant thinks there's something fishy about this whole situation. The timing, the way everything played out, the fact that someone was there to document it all. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to pay for the damage to Mr. Brennan's car, and we're going to call it even. But if anything else happens, anything at all, you're going to be in serious trouble." "I understand." "Good. Because Mr. Brennan also wanted me to give you a message. He says to tell you that some battles aren't worth fighting, and that you should think about what's best for your family." The arrogance of it took my breath away. Chad Brennan was sleeping with my wife, planning to take my daughter, and now he was threatening me through the police. Did he say anything else? Just that he hopes you'll be reasonable about the situation. Reasonable. Right. I left the police station with a repair estimate for $3,000 and a clearer picture of what I was up against. Chad Brennan wasn't just some random guy my wife had met. He was connected, wealthy, and apparently working with Sandy to orchestrate my complete destruction. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated me. I drove straight to Terry's gym, a converted warehouse on the wrong side of town that smelled like sweat and old leather and honest work. Terry was in his office, a cramped space behind the main workout area that was covered with photos of fighters he'd trained over the years. "Tom," he said, looking up from his paperwork, "you look like hell." "I feel worse than I look." I sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Terry, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." "Shoot." "If someone was trying to destroy your life, I mean really destroy it, take everything you cared about, how far would you go to stop them?" Terry leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "How far are we talking? Not murder, not anything that would put me in prison, but beyond that, how far? Tom, what's going on?" I told him everything. The affair, the messages, Sandy's manipulation, Chad's threats, the police station, all of it. When I finished, Terry was quiet for a long moment. "You know what your problem is?" he finally said. "What?" "You're still playing defense. You're reacting to what they're doing instead of making them react to you." "What do you mean?" Terry stood up and walked over to a punching bag hanging in the corner of his office. In boxing, there are two kinds of fighters. They're the ones who wait for their opponent to make a move and then try to counter. And there are the ones who control the pace of the fight, who make their opponent dance to their tune. He threw a quick jab at the bag. "Right now, you're a counterpuncher. But counterpunchers only win if they're better than their opponent. And from what you're telling me, these people have more money, more connections, and more experience at this kind of game than you do. So what do I do?" "You become the aggressor. You stop reacting and start acting. You make them play defense for a while." "How?" Terry smiled, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Leave that to me, kid. I've got some ideas." Saturday night came faster than I expected, and with it, the culmination of everything that had been building for the past week. Terry's plan was simple, elegant, and completely insane, which made it perfect. The key, he'd explained over beers at his gym, is to get them all in one place where you control the environment, make them think they're winning, then flip the script. He recruited two of his fighters, Jimmy Santos and Mike O'Brien, both good kids who owed Terry favors and didn't ask too many questions. The plan required precise timing, a little bit of theater, and a lot of balls. I had the balls. Terry provided the theater. The first part involved Lisa's burner phone, which I'd been carrying around for 2 days. I'd used it to send Chad a message that morning, pretending to be Lisa. "Tom's getting suspicious. We need to talk tonight." Meet me at Sandy's lake cabin at 9 p.m. Bring the divorce papers. Chad had responded immediately. Are you sure it's safe? Sandy will be there. She has a plan to handle Tom if he shows up. This ends tonight. The beauty of it was that Sandy really did have a lake cabin, a rundown place her ex-husband had left her in their divorce. It was isolated, private, and perfect for the kind of confrontation I had in mind. I'd spent the afternoon preparing. Not weapons. I wasn't looking to hurt anyone physically. But I had my phone fully charged, a small digital recorder Terry had loaned me, and a plan that would either vindicate me completely or land me in jail. At 8:30, I parked my truck about a quarter mile from Sandy's cabin and walked through the woods. The October air was crisp and clear, and the moon was bright enough to see by. Perfect conditions for what I had in mind. The cabin sat on a small rise overlooking the lake, connected to the main road by a dirt driveway that wound through the trees. I could see lights in the windows and 2 cars parked outside. Sandy's white sedan and Chad's BMW, which now sported fresh paint where I'd keyed it. I crept closer, staying in the tree line, until I could see through the front window. Sandy, Lisa, and Chad were sitting around a small table, papers spread out in front of them. Even from a distance, I could see that Lisa looked nervous. I pulled out my phone and started recording video, then moved to a window on the side of the cabin where I could hear what they were saying. I don't understand why we have to do this tonight, Lisa was saying. Can't we wait until after I file the papers? Because your husband is becoming a problem, Chad replied. The police called me today. He's escalating, getting desperate. We need to get ahead of this before he does something really stupid. I still think we're moving too fast, Lisa said. Sandy leaned forward, her voice sharp with impatience. Lisa, we've been planning this for months. Tom is never going to just roll over and let you divorce him. He's going to fight, and he's going to make it ugly. The only way to win is to make sure he looks like the bad guy from the start. But using Emma against him... Emma's almost 18, Sandy interrupted. She can choose which parent she wants to live with. And after everything we've told her about Tom's instability, his violent tendencies, his drinking problem, I don't have a drinking problem, I muttered to myself. She'll choose you, Sandy continued. The court will see a pattern of behavior. The vandalism, the stalking, the childhood trauma that makes him unsuitable as a father. It's a slam dunk. I kept recording, my hands shaking with rage. They weren't just planning to divorce me. They were planning to destroy me completely. What about the money? Chad asked. Tom's business is worth about $200,000, Sandy said, consulting a piece of paper. The house is worth another $300,000. Lisa should be able to get at least half of everything, plus alimony and child support. And then? Chad asked. Sandy smiled. Then Lisa sells her half of the business back to Tom for pennies on the dollar. If he can even afford it. Most likely, he'll have to sell the whole thing to pay the divorce settlement. Either way, he ends up broke and alone. What if he fights? Lisa asked. He can't afford to fight, Sandy said. Not against Chad's lawyer. One protracted court battle, and Tom will be bankrupt. He'll have to take whatever we offer him. I'd heard enough. I turned off the recording and crept back into the woods, then pulled out my phone and called Terry. It's time, I said. You sure about this? I'm sure. 20 minutes later, I heard the sound of motorcycles coming up the dirt road. Terry had borrowed 2 Harleys from friends of his, and the sound of them roaring through the quiet night was like thunder. I watched from the woods as Jimmy and Mike parked their bikes at the bottom of the driveway and started walking toward the cabin, making as much noise as possible. They were both wearing leather jackets and looked exactly like the kind of guys you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. Through the window, I could see Sandy, Lisa, and Chad jumping to their feet in alarm. What the hell is that? Chad said. Sandy peered out the window. There are 2 men walking up the driveway. Big guys. They look rough. Call the police, Lisa said. No, Sandy said quickly. We can't have the police here, not with all these papers spread out. If Tom sent them. Tom doesn't know any bikers, Lisa said. How do you know what Tom knows? Sandy snapped. You've been married to the man for 18 years and you didn't know he was capable of stalking you and vandalizing cars. Jimmy and Mike reached the front door and knocked hard. Open up, Jimmy called out in his thick Boston accent. We need to talk. We're not opening the door, Sandy called back. Then we'll wait out here all night, Mike replied. We got nowhere else to be. I could see Chad pacing back and forth, his expensive suit looking ridiculous in the rustic cabin. This is insane. We should call the police. And tell them what? Sandy demanded. That we're being harassed by two guys who are standing peacefully on my property? They haven't threatened us. They haven't tried to break in. The police will tell us to call back if they actually commit a crime. So, what do? We wait them out. But I wasn't planning to wait. I circled around to the back of the cabin, where a sliding door led onto a small deck overlooking a lake. The door was unlocked. Sandy had always been careless about security. I slipped inside and crept through the dark kitchen until I reached the doorway to the main room. Sandy, Lisa, and Chad were all focused on the front of the cabin, where Jimmy and Mike were keeping up a steady stream of conversation designed to keep their attention. I turned on my phone's camera and stepped into the room. Evening, folks. All three of them spun around. Lisa gasped. Chad took a step backward, and Sandy's face went white. Tom, Lisa said, what are you doing here? Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm doing here. I held up my phone, making sure they could see I was recording. I've been listening to your little planning session. Very illuminating. You can't be here, Sandy said, trying to regain her composure. This is private property. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I said. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your conspiracy to defraud me in divorce court. Or maybe they'd be more interested in hearing about how you've been manipulating my daughter for months, turning her against me as part of your revenge fantasy. Sandy's face went from white to red. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. This is all about me firing you 5 years ago, isn't it? You couldn't handle being rejected by a blue-collar loser, so you decided to destroy my marriage and steal my family. You're insane, Chad said, but his voice was shaky. Am I? Let's see what everyone else thinks. I held up my phone. I've got everything recorded. Your whole plan, laid out in detail. Sandy's manipulation, your threats through the police, Lisa's lies about my childhood trauma, all of it. That recording won't be admissible in court, Chad said. Maybe not, but it'll sure be interesting when it shows up on Facebook, won't it? I bet the whole town would love to hear what Millfield's most prominent citizens do for fun. Lisa started crying. Tom, please, we can work this out. Work it out? You mean like how you worked out using my daughter against me? Or how you worked out stealing half my business?
I never meant for it to go this far.
She sobbed. Shut up, Lisa! Sandy snapped. But Lisa was falling apart.
I'm sorry, Tom.
I'm so sorry. Sandy said it would be simple, that you'd just accept it and move on. She said you were too weak to fight back. Weak? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lady, I survived 15 years with a father who used me as a punching bag. You think I'm going to be intimidated by a small-town real estate agent and her sugar daddy? Chad straightened up, trying to look tough. Now listen here. No, you listen. I stepped closer to him. You want to play games? Let's play. But understand that I'm not the same man I was a week ago. A week ago, I was a trusting husband who believed in playing fair. Now I'm something else entirely. What do you want? Sandy asked. I want Lisa to tear up those divorce papers. I want you to stay away from my family. And I want Chad here to disappear back to whatever rock he crawled out from under. And if we don't, Chad asked. I smiled. Then this recording goes viral and all three of you become the laughingstock of Millfield. Sandy, your little social circle will drop you like a hot potato when they find out what you've been up to. Chad, I'm betting your business partners won't appreciate the negative publicity. And Lisa. I looked at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 18 years, who'd betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. Lisa, you'll lose everything. Your job, your reputation, your daughter's respect, because Emma's going to find out the truth about what you've done and how Sandy manipulated her into helping you do it. You can't prove any of that, Sandy said, but she sounded desperate now. Can't I? I pulled out the burner phone I'd taken from Lisa's dresser. I've got months of text messages between Lisa and Chad. I've got evidence of your financial planning. I've got recordings of Emma telling me how you convinced her to turn against me. And now I've got video of all three of you admitting to conspiracy and fraud. The room was silent, except for Lisa's quiet sobbing. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to clean up this mess. All of it. Sandy, you're going to tell Emma the truth about how you manipulated her. Lisa, you're going to choose me or him, but not both. And Chad, you're going to get in your fancy car and drive away from my family forever. And if we do all that, Chad asked, then maybe I don't destroy all three of you. Chad looked at Sandy, who looked at Lisa, who was still crying into her hands. This is blackmail, Sandy said. No, I replied. This is justice. You want to see blackmail? Keep pushing me. The front door opened and Jimmy stuck his head in. Everything okay in here, Tom? Just fine, Jimmy. We're almost done. Chad's face went pale when he realized the bikers were working for me. You planned all this. Every bit of it. You see, I may be just a blue-collar guy who fixes things for a living, but I'm not stupid, and I sure as hell don't give up without a fight. Lisa finally looked up at me. Her makeup streaked down her cheeks. What do you want me to say, Tom? I want you to choose, right here, right now. Him or me. She looked at Chad, then back at me. If I choose you, how do I know you'll ever forgive me? You don't. But if you choose him, you'll definitely lose everything. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked over to the table where the divorce papers were spread out. She picked them up and tore them in half. I choose you, she said quietly. Chad's face went red with anger. Lisa, don't be an idiot. He's bluffing. No, I said. I'm not. I held up my phone and hit send. The recording I'd made started uploading to YouTube, Facebook, and the Millfield Community Forum simultaneously. What did you just do? Sandy screamed. I just gave the people of Millfield some entertainment for their Saturday night, I said. Should be quite the conversation starter at church tomorrow. Chad lunged toward me, but Jimmy and Mike appeared in the doorway, and he stopped short. I'd think carefully about your next move, I said, because those boys behind me have been looking forward to some exercise all evening. Chad backed down, his hands shaking with rage. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, it is. I looked around the room with the three people who'd tried to destroy my life. Sandy, stay away from my family. Chad, get out of town. Lisa, we'll talk when I get home. I turned and walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and folks, next time you want to ruin someone's life, make sure they don't know how to fight back. I walked out into the night air, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I could hear Sandy screaming at Lisa, and Chad arguing about what to do next. But that was their problem now. Jimmy and Mike were waiting by their bikes, grinning like kids who just pulled off the perfect prank. How'd we do, boss? Jimmy asked. Perfect, I said. Absolutely perfect. As I drove home, I thought about what Terry had told me about being an aggressor instead of a counterpuncher. He'd been right. Sometimes you had to stop reacting and start acting. Sometimes you had to become the villain in someone else's story to be the hero in your own. The house was dark when I pulled into the garage. I sat in my truck for a moment, looking at the place I'd called home for 18 years. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Lisa and I would have to figure out if our marriage was worth saving, or if too much damage had been done. Emma would have to deal with learning the truth about how she'd been manipulated, and I'd have to figure out how to live with the man I'd become tonight. But for now, I was just glad it was over. I got out of my truck and walked toward the house where my wife was waiting for me in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. Tom, she said, we need to talk. Yeah, I said, we do. And for the first time in months, I felt like we might actually have something worth talking about.